They say some places remember love, the way a porch remembers footsteps, or how trees remember laughter. Well, this land remembers everything. It remembers my husband's hands, rough and steady, planting tomatoes behind the shed. It remembers the echo of my children's voices as they ran barefoot through the tall grass, chasing each other until the stars came out. And it remembers me, standing in the same old apron, waving at them with a cup of sweet tea in one hand and a prayer in the other. I didn't just live here. I poured myself into this land. My name is Helen Shaw. I'm 75 years old, a widow of 21 years, and until recently, I thought my family respected what this place meant. I thought they understood that it wasn't just a plot of dirt. They were raised on it. They were raised in the shadow of the same elm trees I now sit under with a cane across my knees and arthritis in my fingers. I was wrong. The land sits just past the edge of town, 14 acres that used to be farmland long before Raymond, my eldest, came into the world. It had a red barn that's mostly leaned into itself now and a small tool shed that still smells like my husband's pipe tobacco. The house is modest, not run down, not fancy, just home. When my husband died, the land became mine. Legal and proper. The deed was updated, notarized, and tucked away like he asked me to. Just in case, he'd said. At the time, I didn't think I'd ever need to use it. In the last few years, my son Raymond and his wife Tina had started dropping by more often. At first, I was grateful. I thought perhaps they missed me. I cooked when they came, always something hearty. Tina never really ate much, but she made sure to comment on the salt. "Maybe too much for your age, Helen," she once said, wrinkling her nose as if she'd done me a favor by showing up. Still, I smiled. They asked odd questions, always slipping them in like coins under a door. "Do you still use all this land? Isn't it a bit much to manage? Wouldn't it be nice to have a smaller place, closer to town?" I'd laugh and say something like, "It's managed just fine. My roses bloom on time and the taxes are paid, thank you." They'd chuckle, exchange glances, and I'd pour more lemonade. Looking back, I should have heard it. The sharpness behind the sweetness. The way Tina would look out at the pasture like she was measuring it. The way Raymond started showing up in a pressed shirt instead of the flannel I'd given him one Christmas. One Sunday afternoon, we sat on the porch. The sun was dipping low, casting that warm orange glow over the fence posts. Raymond leaned over the railing, his voice soft but calculated. "Ma, I know you've got a lot of memories here, but maybe it's time to think about simplifying, maybe letting someone else make use of the land." I turned to look at him. "Someone like who?" He shrugged. "A developer, maybe. They're buying up lots like this. You'd make a good sum. Move into town, be closer to everyone." "Closer to whom?" I asked. He didn't answer. Tina was inside, pretending to wash dishes that didn't need washing. I could see her watching us through the window. I tightened my grip on the porch rail. "Raymond," I said, "your father and I built this life with our hands. We buried our dog in that field. We danced under those trees. I'm not leaving it behind because it's inconvenient for you to drive 10 extra minutes to visit your mother." He raised both hands. "It's just a suggestion, Ma." But the silence that followed wasn't just silence. It was the warning I didn't yet know how to read. Later that night, as I swept the kitchen and turned off the porch light, I remember something my husband once said. People don't always steal with guns. Sometimes they use smiles and paperwork. At the time, I thought he was being poetic, but soon I'd understand exactly what he meant. It was 2 weeks after that porch conversation when I heard it for the first time, what they really thought of me. Raymond and Tina had stopped by again unannounced, claiming they were checking in. Tina brought over a pie from the store, still in its plastic container, and placed it on the counter like she expected applause. I made coffee. I always made coffee, even if they didn't stay long. Something about the smell grounded me. I remember excusing myself to the hallway. The arthritis in my hands had flared up that morning, and I needed to rub some balm into my knuckles. As I passed the kitchen on my way back, I stopped. Their voices were low but not low enough. Tina was laughing. I'm telling you, she can't even hold a pen without shaking. We could hand her a blank paper and she'd probably think she signed it. Raymond chuckled in return. She's not going to know what hit her. We'll make it clean. She won't even realize until the deal's done. I froze. I wasn't supposed to hear that. I wasn't supposed to be standing there at all, apparently. Just the forgotten old woman in the rocking chair nodding off to birdsong and soap operas. I stepped into the kitchen quietly. They jumped. I looked at Tina, then at Raymond, and said, if I can't hold a pen, I must still be holding this family together with a thread. Raymond coughed awkwardly. Tina's smile tightened like elastic. We were just joking, Helen. You know how families tease. I smiled too, but mine didn't reach my eyes. Of course, just a joke. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Tina's voice. She can't even hold a pen. I stared at my hands under the lamp's soft light. They were lined and stiff, yes, but they still moved, still worked, still held the weight of a home, a history. 3 mornings later, I got a letter in the mail. White envelope, fancy logo, some real estate agency I'd never dealt with before. Thank you for signing the release forms and agreeing to list your property for auction. As agreed, the sale will be executed on... I read the date twice, then a third time. The blood drained from my face. They were selling my land. And according to this letter, I had signed off on it. I sat at the kitchen table shaking, the letter open before me like a slap. My hands clutched the arms of the chair, not from weakness, but to keep myself from flipping the table in rage. I never signed anything. I never agreed to anything. They forged my name. The phone sat by the window. I dialed the number on the letter with fingers that barely trembled. A chipper voice answered. Good morning, Palisade Property Group. How may I assist you? Yes, I said calmly. This is Helen Shaw. I received notice that I signed a release to sell my land. That's impossible. I never did. There was a pause. 1 moment, ma'am. She returned after 30 seconds. Yes, Miss Shaw. We do have signed authorization forms. Received last Tuesday. Looks like everything's been cleared on your end. My end? I nearly choked. You must have a forged signature. I want to see the document, and I want to know who submitted it. There was another silence. I'll have someone call you back. I hung up and stared out the window. The trees swayed in the breeze. The grass glowed in the sun. My land, my name. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just took out the small red journal where I write my recipes and made a new entry on the last page. Step 1, let them laugh. Step 2, gather proof. Step 3, show up when they least expect it. I clicked the pen shut. I could still hold one just fine. The next morning, I ironed my best blouse, the pale cream one with the soft lace collar, and pulled my coat from the hallway rack. I wasn't dressing to impress anyone. I was dressing for battle. I took the 10:30 bus into town. It was slower than I remembered, maybe because I hadn't ridden it since before Raymond got his license. He used to offer to drive me, used to call every Sunday without Tina needing to remind him. Now they forged my signature. I stepped off 2 blocks before the courthouse and walked the rest of the way. I needed a moment to steady myself, to feel the sun on my back and the pavement under my shoes. I wasn't just walking into a building. I was walking into a war. The law office hadn't changed much. Same chipped door frame, same smell of paper and lemon cleaner, but the man behind the desk had. Miss Shaw, he said, standing when he saw me. Hello, Thomas, I replied. It's been a long time. Thomas Ward had been my late husband's friend. They fished together on Sunday mornings and grumbled about the world getting louder. Now he wore glasses thicker than my teacups and a tie that didn't quite match his shirt. I need your help, I said, sitting down across from him. I figured, he nodded gently. I saw your name come through on an auction list. Thought that was odd. It's more than odd, I said, pulling the letter from my coat pocket. They forged my name. My own son, Thomas. He did this. He read the letter carefully, then turned to his computer, tapping keys with surprising speed for someone his age. "You're right," he said after a minute. "They submitted scanned documents, ID included. The signature's shaky, but it passed." "My hands shake when I'm cold," I said, "not when I'm angry." He smiled grimly. "The problem is, Helen, they used an old hospital copy of your ID. I can request the original forms, but it might take weeks. Meanwhile, if you don't act fast, that land could be out from under you before you blink." I looked him square in the eye. "I'm not blinking." He leaned back, folding his hands. "Do you still have the original deed?" I nodded slowly. My husband made me promise to keep it safe. "Where is it?" "Locked in a box under the floorboard of the sewing room. I haven't touched it in years." He raised an eyebrow. "Then I suggest you do, and fast." I stood. "I'll be back tomorrow, with proof." That night, I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and lit a candle in the sewing room. The floorboard creaked under my feet like it remembered me. I knelt slowly and pried it loose with the end of a butter knife. There it was. A metal lockbox, scuffed with time and dust. The key was still on the chain I kept around my neck. Inside, my marriage license, my husband's funeral program, his father's war medal, and there, folded between parchment and a yellow ribbon, the original land deed. My hands didn't tremble as I opened it. There, in clean black ink, was my husband's signature, his real one. Below it, mine. The clause was there, just as he told me. "This land may never be transferred, sold, or claimed by another party without the in-person consent and notarized signature of both original owners or their surviving spouse." I exhaled deeply. The smell of old paper filled the room. They thought I didn't know how to protect what's mine, that I'd forgotten, that I'd lost my edge with my years. But I had something stronger than memory. I had receipts. The next morning, I returned to Thomas's office with the deed in a waterproof sleeve, tucked into a manila envelope and strapped under my coat like a secret weapon. When I handed it to him, he nodded slowly. "They're going to be very surprised." "I hope so," I said. "But I have to ask, you want to stop the auction immediately or—" "Let them go through with it," I said quietly. "Let them show up. Let them gather and bid. Let them laugh." I stood. I want to be the last thing they expect to walk through that door. 3 days passed with no calls from Raymond. No drop-ins, no check-ins, nothing. The silence felt deliberate, like the air just before a thunderstorm. I didn't call him either. I didn't ask questions or drop hints. I wanted him comfortable, confident, let him believe I was sitting on the porch, none the wiser, drinking my tea while he dismantled everything beneath me. On the 4th day, I found the flyer. It came folded between a local grocery circular and a charity newsletter. It was glossy, bright red and gold print with bold words at the top. Public land auction, 14 acres. Prime development property owner, Helen Shaw, date, September 28th. Town Hall Annex. They even had a photo, my land, my trees, my memories. I sat down slowly on the porch steps. My hands were still. My chest wasn't. I must have stared at it for an hour. The date was 10 days away. 10 days until strangers walked through that room, raised numbered paddles, and carved up a life I built with blistered hands and years of sacrifice. 10 days until my son sold me out in front of the whole town. I placed the flyer on the kitchen table, looked at it the way you look at something already burning. Then I picked up the phone and called Thomas. "They're going through with it," I said. "I figured," he replied. "We'll be ready. The notarized deed holds more power than anything they forged. I've already filed the preemptive injunction paperwork. You'll walk in with it in hand." "I want them to see it burn before their eyes," I whispered. "Then we'll let them light the match." The next week, my neighbor Grace stopped by. She's lived across from me for nearly 3 decades, always brings over extra jam in the spring. She knocked on the screen door holding a bag of peaches. "Are you really selling, Helen?" I blinked. "Who told you that?" "Everyone's saying it," she said softly. Raymond's been going around telling folks you're downsizing, moving into one of those senior condos near the clinic, that you signed the land off weeks ago. I felt something hollow form in my chest. He's telling people that? Grace nodded. I thought it was odd. You love this place. Always said you'd leave it in a box. I smiled. That's still the plan. Grace looked confused, but I didn't clarify. Instead, I thanked her for the peaches and watched her walk back across the dirt road. She paused halfway and turned back. If you need anything, someone to sit with you at the auction. I'll be fine, I said. But if you come, wear red. Red? I nodded. Makes it easier to find allies in a room full of wolves. Every day after that, I prepared quietly. I laid out the navy coat I would wear, my husband's, with the stitched initials inside the lapel. I polished my walking shoes, checked my old cassette recorder, and practiced walking slowly but upright. I wanted to look calm, strong, not angry, not broken. Let them think I was coming to watch. Let them think I'd already given up. The day before the auction, I got one more letter. This one from the auctioneer's office confirming my absence waiver had been accepted. Apparently, my son had told them I was too frail to attend in person, that I'd prefer they handle everything on my behalf. He had even signed my name at the bottom of the authorization form. I read it 3 times. Then I placed it gently in the same manila envelope as the forged sale documents and sealed it. See you tomorrow, Raymond, I whispered. Then I set my alarm. The wolves were gathering. They just didn't know the shepherd still had teeth. The morning of the auction arrived quiet and cold. A mist hung over the edge of the trees, like the land itself was holding its breath. I dressed carefully. Soft gray blouse, the navy coat, and slacks that hadn't been ironed since my husband's memorial. I pinned my silver hair back with the same clip I wore at my granddaughter's christening, back when family still felt like family. Before leaving, I stood at the edge of the field. The grass was damp, the soil was still. I closed my eyes, placed a hand on the fence post, and whispered, "You're not going anywhere." Then I turned and walked back to the house. At exactly 10:45 a.m., Thomas pulled up in his beige sedan and gave me a respectful nod. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He knew. He'd seen it in my eyes the day I brought him the deed. We didn't speak on the drive to the town hall annex. There was nothing left to say. When we arrived, the parking lot was nearly full. Big trucks, glossy sedans, license plates from 2 counties over. Strangers in suits walked up the steps in packs holding brochures and portfolio binders, like they were headed into a business lunch, not someone else's life. We waited in the car until 11:03 a.m. "I want them to be mid-sentence," I said. Thomas smiled and checked his watch. "They'll never forget this." We stepped out together and walked through the front doors. The room was loud. Auction paddles were being passed out. Laughter buzzed like flies in summer. At the far end of the room, I saw them. Raymond, Tina, their daughter, Rebecca. All 3 seated in the second row, polished and confident. Tina wore a bright blue blouse and pearls. She looked like someone who already thought the deed was done. Raymond leaned back in his chair, smirking as he spoke with a young man holding a land appraisal document. Now, I stood at the back with Thomas. The auctioneer, big man, red tie, voice like a megaphone, stepped to the podium. "All right, folks. First on the list, 14 acres of prime pasture land zoned for both agriculture and light residential development. Owner of record, Helen Shaw." He paused and looked down at his clipboard. "Miss Shaw has, unfortunately, authorized us to proceed on her behalf today." The crowd rustled. Some polite murmurs of sympathy. And that's when I stepped forward. Shoes slow and steady against the hardwood floor. All eyes turned. Conversations halted. I heard Tina suck in a breath. I walked all the way to the front row, opened my purse, and pulled out the manila envelope. Then I turned and looked directly at the auctioneer. "Before you auction off what's mine," I said clearly, "you may want to look at this." I handed the envelope to Thomas, who placed it on the podium with quiet precision. The auctioneer blinked. "Ma'am, we were told—" "You were told wrong." He opened the envelope. His eyebrows lifted almost immediately. Inside, the original notarized deed, a copy of the forged authorization form, a time-stamped affidavit of complaint filed with the county sheriff, a signed cease and desist letter. People began whispering. One man in the third row stood up and said, "Wait, is this land even available for sale?" Raymond rose to his feet. "She doesn't know what she's saying. She's been confused for months." Thomas interrupted. "This woman is of sound mind and legal authority. The documents submitted to your office were forged. The land is not and never was for sale." Tina stood too. "This is a mistake. She told us." "I told you nothing," I said coldly, "and I signed even less." The auctioneer cleared his throat. His face was pale. This auction is hereby paused, pending legal review." There were groans from the back of the room. People started packing their papers. A few threw glances at Raymond that could cut glass. I turned to face my son. He opened his mouth. I raised one hand. "Not here." Raymond's face was red. Tina's eyes darted everywhere, looking for an exit. Rebecca stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Then, calmly, I turned and walked back down the aisle. I didn't stumble. I didn't cry. And I didn't look back. Thomas and I didn't speak until we were back outside. The air was brisk, sharper than it had been that morning. A few auction attendees stood near their cars, watching us in quiet confusion. A man in a blazer said something under his breath. Something like, "waste of time," but I didn't acknowledge him. "What?" I had other things on my mind. Just as we reached the car, I heard footsteps. Quick ones. "Mom!" Raymond's voice, urgent now, desperate. I stopped. He jogged up beside me, breath uneven, cheeks flushed with something between fear and fury. "Why would you embarrass us like that?" I turned, slowly. "Embarrass you?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't understand how good this deal was. We had developers ready to pay triple market value." "I don't care about the market, Raymond. I care about integrity, something you clearly pawned off for profit." Thomas stood a few steps away, arms crossed, saying nothing. Raymond's voice cracked. "We were trying to help you. You're alone out there, Mom. You're getting older." I stepped closer. Getting older doesn't mean getting dumber. He looked down, but only for a second. "We thought you'd be okay with it once it was done. Once you saw how much money you'd get." I shook my head slowly. "You forged my name, lied to my face, told people I was too frail to attend the auction. Do you know how that feels?" His lips parted, but no words came. "I buried your father on that land. I nursed you in that house, and you handed it over like it was a used car on a sales lot." "I didn't think you'd find out," he muttered. "And there it is," I said. "The only honest thing you've said all day." Behind him, Tina had come out of the building, too. She didn't approach, just watched, clutching her purse like it was all she had left to hold. Raymond took a breath. "What do you want from me? An apology?" "No," I said flatly. "I want distance and silence." He blinked. "You don't mean that." But I did. I walked to Thomas's car and opened the door. Before I got in, I looked over my shoulder. "The county has the complaint. If you try anything else, the charges will stick. I won't protect you again." His face crumbled, and for a moment I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered the flyer with my name printed like a classified ad, the signatures, the smirks. I closed the car door without another word. Later that evening, I sat by the window with the manila envelope still resting on my lap. I opened it one last time, not to reread the documents, but to place something new inside. A photograph. It was taken in the 1970s. My husband, arms wrapped around a younger me, both of us standing beneath the old oak in the back field, the field that was nearly sold out from under me. I tucked it in gently. That envelope had held betrayal, truth, and justice. Now it held memory, too. I sealed it shut and placed it in the lockbox with the deed. Then I slid the floorboard back into place. I didn't need to look at it again. The land was still mine, and they knew it. The days after the auction were quiet. No more unannounced visits, no more store-bought pies, no more calls asking how I was feeling, if the weather had been too much for my joints, or if I'd thought more about retirement options. It was as if I'd vanished from their version of the family, or maybe, just maybe, they'd finally realized I was never as weak as they needed me to be. I didn't miss the silence. I welcomed it. Raymond tried calling once. I let it ring. Then again 2 days later. This time he left a voicemail. Mumbled apology. Something about being misguided, about Tina getting too far ahead of things, and a plea to move past it. I deleted it without listening to the end. There are some lines you don't cross with people who raised you. And forgery? That's not a line. That's a canyon. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace and ownership of my own story again. So I sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a notepad, and wrote 2 simple letters. One to the Community Garden Initiative, a small nonprofit that had long tried to find affordable land to grow produce for shelters and low-income families. I told them I'd be willing to donate 7 acres, half the land. The other letter went to a women's recovery center in the next county. They'd once sent me a thank you card for donating a coat years ago. They now needed land for transitional housing. I offered them the back 3 acres and the barn. The remaining 4, I kept for myself, just enough for the house, my rose bushes, and the patch of field where my husband's ashes were buried. I didn't want to leave the land, but I didn't want it to die with me either. 1 week later, I stood at the edge of my porch and watched young women from the shelter survey the back lot with clipboards in hand and determination in their eyes. One of them waved at me. I waved back. I could see it all now. Raised beds of vegetables, the laughter of women rebuilding, the start of something honest, something earned, not taken, not forged, grown. A month after the auction, I got one more visit. Not Raymond, not Tina. Rebecca, my granddaughter. She showed up with a paper bag of apples and tears in her eyes. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear I didn't know what they were doing. I thought you'd agreed to sell the land." I nodded and gestured to the porch swing. She sat beside me, nervously twisting the strap of her purse. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I wanted to believe they had your blessing, but when I saw you walk into that auction hall..." Her voice broke. "You look like a mountain." I chuckled softly. "Mountains don't sign deeds behind people's backs." She smiled tearfully. I took one of the apples from the bag and bit into it. Tart, cold, honest. We didn't speak for a while, just rocked gently in the swing like the old days, before things got too complicated. After she left, I stood at the edge of the field again, looking out over the land that had been so close to disappearing from under me. My name was still on it. My hands still worked. And my voice, quiet as it was, had shaken a room full of liars. I'll never forget what they tried to do, but I won't let it define the rest of my days. Some people steal with violence. Others do it with ink. But me? I reclaimed everything they tried to take by simply showing up with the truth. They said I couldn't hold a pen, but I still hold the land. And now I hold the last word. Helen Shaw.